Have a conversation today with Tyler Kuresa, Tyler from Onsite Analytics, in getting hell yes. So we've kind of slowed down the count a little bit during the summertime. I know everyone's on vacation, so we don't want to be piling up in everyone's inboxes with invites and podcasts. But what makes it great is that we get to have concentrated conversations throughout the week with folks that are really changing the game within real estate. So excited to have Tyler on. Some background on him. I mean, we always talk about professional athletes and how athleticism and teamwork helps drive, the whole sales context and the things that we need to focus on with respect to sales. Always a line of conversation that ends up popping up there. And for one listening for the first time, or maybe just catching up after a while, this is the Getting to Hell Yes show. We talk about what elements we consider when trying to find a hell yes buyer is selling in property management. Getting a hell yes buyer has already prioritized the problem. So when we think about the buyer's journey, they've already recognized they've got a problem, so that they're beyond the education stage and they're starting to formulate their options. In some cases, they've already tried something and it failed. And so they really are now anxious to recover from that lost time. Those guys those kind of buyers are incredible to sell to, because they almost walk into you with a pricing, a proposal, and ready to go. Here's my scope of work. Here's what success looks like. The Getting the buyer might not know how to solve it, or might not know how tech solves it. So often, when we talk to people, the tendency is to consider the legacy options for solving a problem. And that usually includes hiring people. That usually includes maybe vending it out to third party. And often last choice is change of process or change of technology, just because of the implications of making those choices. So we'll bring it up and talk a little about that today. But they are ultimately seeking new alternatives, because as we know right now, there's not a lot of people. And if you're choosing vendors, you're basically choosing from the same stack of people you would have otherwise hired. So it really is coming down to technology and process considerations if you want to move the ball. Folks listening, you're welcome to ask questions. We love the engagement. It makes the show a whole lot more interesting. And as always, we kick it off with an introduction from our guest. Tyler, a little bit about your background. How did you nip into that role? And then most importantly, what's the problem that you guys solve for your buyers at Onsite Analytics?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm Tyler Kuresa, founder, president of Onsite Analytics. Before I had gotten into real estate, I was a professional baseball player. As you kind of mentioned, that's how I paid my way through school. That's how I bought my first car and things like that. So I played with UC Santa Barbara in Southern California. And then I played for the Minnesota Twins organization in their minor league system. So I never made it to the big leagues or the show or what you guys watch on TV, but it gave me a good little kickstart in life, which was really great. So left professional baseball in 2014, got into real estate brokerage originally, and kind of fell in love with investment right away. So started syndicating my own acquisitions, raised a couple $1 million, and went out and bought a small portfolio of apartment complexes. And what really turned me on to what ultimately became Onsite Analytics is that I was self-managing, which was incredibly difficult. I completely underestimated how hard management in general was. But specifically, I was losing a lot of money on the maintenance side of my P&L. And I had one incident in particular that just really kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it was this property in Sacramento that we had purchased. We had done, due diligence on the systems and the condition of the property, which included a full, inspection of the HVAC system. And one of the units, my inspector climbed up into the attic, and he saw in a small corner that there was a collapsed air duct. And he said, "Hey, so just so you know, this one unit's got a collapsed air duct. It's putting pressure on the condenser. No need to do anything right now, but when that unit goes down, let's just replace the whole thing." That's kind of the game plan, right? That's the game plan, along with all the other game plans of everything else that was found during our inspections. Well, heat wave comes in a couple months later. I call a vendor out to go and look at this unit that has failed in the heat wave. And in the heat of summer, you want to get it back up right away. He quotes me about $1,200 worth of repairs. And so we do those repairs. And within 8 months, that air conditioner was dead. It was down again. it needed to be replaced. And so, I basically sunk $1,200 into this single air conditioner. And when I did my postmortem of, could this have been avoided? I realized, hey, my vendor made an honest mistake. He didn't see this collapsed air duct, but I knew that it was there from my inspection. So if he would have known it was there, it would have totally changed the way he diagnosed the problem, the way he recommended the solution to me. And so, ultimately, I just realized it wasn't his fault. And so I just recognized that there was this gap in the industry between the amount of data that can be available for decision making on the maintenance side of operations and the amount of data that was ultimately being used to make those decisions. And so I started interviewing property management firms. I said, okay, look, how do you deal with this, right? Because whether you're budgeting for maintenance or making everyday maintenance decisions at the site level, you should know what's the history of this unit. How old is this refrigerator I'm working on? Is this water heater under warranty? That's all information that should be, calculated into your diagnosis. And the most common response I got was, no, we don't track any of that stuff. This is just the way business is. That's just a cost of business. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And I just felt
you usually lose.
Yeah, exactly. and the scariest part of that whole mentality was they don't realize when they're losing or how much they're losing. They just go, oh man, we just had a bad year, right? We projected X and we spent Y, and sometimes that happens.
It's funny, I've just changed some of the language in our sales deck to gambling. I've said you're just gambling because it really is a gamble, right? I mean, if you take down the core, and gambling has we'd said like guessing, but guessing is really kind of a bit of a softer word than gambling. Because if you're thinking about the trip or the equipment or the capital expenditures, it's a gamble. If you're by definition, if you don't have all the information or you don't have the best information, it's a gamble. And you're trying to, and the goal is to try and de-risk that gamble. Otherwise, like recognize that you're part of your decision-making criteria is a gamble. And so like own that rather than ignore that.
Yes.
Right. And so to keep going. So it's just an interesting conversation how like this de-risking of decision-making is something that's happening. It's becoming more and more important, especially as we get into field operations.
100%. And every company either markets or wants to believe that they're making sound data-driven decisions. And so at Onsite Analytics, our sales pitch is really simple. If you want to make data-driven decisions, we bring the data to the table. And we make sure that you have really granular, really clean, really accurate data on your own portfolio, on your own spending, on your own work orders to make the best decisions possible, whether you're an executive, talking to ownership and making big time budgeting decisions, or you're a maintenance supervisor who's evaluating whether a water heater should be repaired or replaced.
So let's pause for a second here, because like one of the things that appreciate that. So one of the things that we hear all the time with respect to maintenance is the data is terrible or non-existent. So then how do you guys, and then the blame gets like cast around like it's the wind, but like, how do you guys begin to corral the data around maintenance specifically, or even capital assets?
Well, I'll give it. Yeah, capital assets is a great place to start because we kind of own that process start to finish. So when a new operator signs on with Onsite Analytics, we send a crew out to every unit in their portfolio, and that crew enters the unit. They spend about 45 seconds taking pictures of all of the appliances, all of the HVAC, the water heaters, in every single unit. You have 10,000 units. We're going into 10,000 units, and we're taking about 50,000 photos. Then we have proprietary software that we've developed on the back end that can take all the information from that photo and develop an inventory report showing them the age, the lifespan, the warranty status. If it's HVAC, we can tell them what type of Freon it's using, the likelihood of failure. We can even project out like potential capital expenditure situations in terms of like which of your appliances are going to fail. So we own that process basically from start to finish. It gets a little tougher when we start bringing in work orders and invoices because we're not inputting that information. So sometimes we have to spend a lot of time cleaning it up. But in terms of like knowing what you have at your portfolio, we can tell you with certainty the age, the lifespan, the likelihood of failure, the warranty status of all the appliances within the entire portfolio.
And when does a buyer decide that that's important? Is it like M&A? Is it when is it pre-M&A, post-M&A? Is it at they take over property? Is it like a loss, a win? Like what makes them choose to want to do that?
Yeah, we have a couple different triggers. Certainly, when a portfolio is adopted all at once, so you have like a management company that's onboarding, like let's say somewhere between 500 and 1,000 units all at one time, and they're just trying to wrap their heads around what exactly they have. That would be a time that they would call us and say, "Look, we're trying to get more visibility into all these new properties that we're now managing. We want to make sure that as we move forward, we're making the correct decisions as it pertains to like renovations or even just like day-to-day maintenance." Another is we get a lot of calls in the early springtime. The budgeting season is in the fall. All the budgets are set. And then the early springtime comes, and let's say you budgeted, you have 150 units. You thought that maybe 4 of them would need to be replaced throughout the year. And now it's April and you've replaced 7, and we haven't even made it to hot season yet. And now the client owner is upset, and they're coming to the management company and they're going, "What's going on here?" And the management company is, they're kind of like, "We don't know," because they don't have information on the units.
Right. The
And
guessing blind.
we get a lot of calls during that period for them to say, "Hey, we need you to come in and help us tell a story to the client owners as to what is going on here and what's the path forward." And the only way you can tell that story is with the data. Otherwise,
how much of the data from the due diligence walk is available to make that decision?
From their due diligence walk?
Yeah.
Really none, because what they're doing in due diligence is they're going in, they're looking more so at like cosmetics. They're looking into systems like electrical and plumbing for sure, but to dedicate the resources to like, let's just use capital assets as an example, to dedicate the resources during due diligence to capture all of that information, you would have to do it by hand, which has 2 problems. One, it just takes way too long without the technology that we've developed specifically to solve this problem. And 2, the data becomes very, very inaccurate. You can imagine a technician sitting there with a clipboard trying to write down the model and serial number of every refrigerator. It just becomes too cumbersome. And we actually work with a lot of operators who tried to do this prior. They tried to capture all this information, and it was just too expensive, and it was too unreliable for them.
Gotcha. And so the folks that are looking to use that solution, are they seeking to improve? Like, what's prompting them to realize they've got to improve their decision making? Like we talked, because we know that a lot of people are flying blind.
Yes.
And they seem to be perfectly comfortable flying blind, better for worse. So why do folks decide that they've got to change the way that they make decisions? Is it what gap are they trying to close?
It's in my experience, and this is just from my vantage point, because they'll tell you, we want to improve NOI, or we want to, do this and that. From my experience, the biggest trigger really is, we missed our forecast big time this year, and we got yelled at by our client owner, and we don't want that to happen again. We don't want that client owner to churn. We want to keep them happy. We want to make sure that we run a tighter ship going forward. And that is typically the biggest trigger that we see. And I'll give you kind of a more tangible example. We get a lot of like directors of maintenance coming to us and saying like, our budgets are getting crushed because we plan to have 2 water heaters replaced in 2025, and we've had 15 replaced in 2025. And it's just totally crushing our budget. We didn't foresee that at all. And we want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I think that's a story that a lot of operators can relate to, because prior to the information age, what options did you really have? I mean, most operators, when they're budgeting for maintenance, they're going through and they're looking at their historicals, their last 3 years. and they're saying, all right, well, we think that maybe it's going to be 10% more next year.
Yeah.
When it's like, okay, but every single system at that property is another year older. Every one of your vendors are adjusting their prices for inflation. If you're not taking these things into account, and not just in the abstract, but if you're not taking these things into account, like the actual raw data, then you are just gambling. You are just hoping that, you're covering your eyes and throwing the dart, and you're hoping you hit the bullseye.
Yeah. Interesting. And so like those, I think one thing that we have noticed in these conversations is that the hell yes kind of anxiety or whatever, cause for change, many times or more often than not, I should say, it's an external force versus an internal force. Because you're right. Like we all talk about trying to improve NOI, but unless there's an owner that's hammering the table saying improve my NOI, the priorities to improve it just don't emerge. And
Right.
so when we talk about our side of things, the maintenance pieces, we ask the question like, what are your work orders at, right? What's your budget at for NOI? And often like they find that because they haven't hired, they've got open job positions, their actually budget they're not over budget. They're way off target on completing work orders because they haven't been able to hire the people, but they're not off budget on NOI. And so I'm finding on the maintenance side of things, the NOI conversation, while it should be, and it's funny, I was having a conversation in AA with like a maintenance leader and then an asset manager. And they were like, the asset manager was like, I want them to only think about NOI. But then the maintenance manager is like, look, NOI is like an outcome of the work that I do. It's not the work that I do. I realize that you manage NOI, but it's not something I manage day-to-day basis. I have to manage a capital plan. I have to manage work orders. I have to manage turns. So I manage operating things, not the financial P&L. And we hope that we hit the numbers by managing operating correctly. But ultimately, I'm measured by the ability to get the job done. And I'll get fired if I don't get the job done, but I will not get fired for missing NOI, missing budget. That's just the way it works. And that was a crunchy conversation with the asset manager who really wanted everyone to just think about NOI. So when you're out there talking to folks, I mean, you mentioned the external forces of like being yelled at for missing budget. Like, does that mean that your buyers, the asset manager level, or who's buying your software?
Typically our buyers are like a director of maintenance type. There are, I'd say more likely there are champions, and our buyers are the asset managers. And like, to your point, we see every sale as between 2 and 3 different sales processes. So, you're typically, let's say in a really simple sale, you're working with an asset manager, a director of maintenance, and a regional manager. Well, the features and the solutions that we're proposing to each one of those 3 personas is going to be widely different based on what that specific person cares about, how they're personally incentivized, and the outcomes that they specifically want to see. And we have a really we have such a broad product. We're kind of lucky in that way. We're like, we are the data providers. And so that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so we have, good flexibility to be able to do things like that. But yeah, multifamily is a really, really tough sales cycle when you're selling new technology. And for that reason, because these roles, they all have different priorities, and they all have different resources, and time is not one of them for literally any of them.
No, it's not. I'm finding that more and more, right? Like if we can save you time, like the path to yes on a time savings, I mean, ultimately you have to put the ROI number in there. But in your sort of urgency with respect to solving the conversation, the path to yes can be very frequently around saving time. Do you find, like, given as you mentioned, the 3 stakeholders in the deal, do you find how do you find the complexity versus selling into owners or owner operators or selling to fee managers or owners? Like, do you have owners that want to buy?
Originally our hypothesis was that vertically integrated firms would be much simpler to sell
Mhm.
into because they have control over the budget and the
Mhm.
management. We actually have not found that to be the case.
Very
Not
interesting.
that fee managers are actually easier, but we find the process to be actually quite similar between fee management and vertically integrated, and we find the process of getting budget approved under both circumstances to be equally difficult. And
Mhm.
actually, there's some fee management firms, like if you're working with like a strong regional player who has really loyal ownership groups, sometimes it
Mhm.
can be a much easier sale.
Yeah.
Because it's just not as much of a process to get budget across the table.
Yeah. And do you find that those fee managers, like when they buy your software, is that part of their overhead fee, or is that something they flow through to manage to ownership group?
It's something they float through to ownership,
Yeah,
which is where, frankly, all the complexity comes in when it
naturally.
comes to the sales process, because it we've kind of nailed our personas in terms of like what are directors of maintenance in general looking for, what are regionals looking for. But what can be really difficult is, okay, let's say we're doing a 10,000 unit portfolio, and we're charging $10 up front a unit to run this capital asset inventory. We know that the director of maintenance wants it. We know that the regional wants it, but sometimes the hardest part is just getting a seat at the table with the asset manager who
Mhm.
is ultimately going to sign the contract and approve the budget. And
Mhm.
actually, that is typically our easiest conversation. I come
Mhm.
from the investment side. I still syndicate actively for commercial real estate deals. I know how these guys think. I know how they talk. I enjoy talking to these people, and I can typically show them a really clear ROI analysis. And so once we get at the table with the ownership group, it's usually a very easy sale. But what we find is that the hardest part is a management company that wants our services, but they're too gun shy to even propose a meeting between
Yeah.
us and their ownership group. Like, you know, they may have come to us because the ownership group was mad and they're worried about them churning, and so they don't want to rock the boat again with some big budget proposal for some new service.
Mhm. Do
And
you
that can be
find
really
that what's that?
I said that can be really difficult.
Well, especially since the asset manager is the one that's gonna talk to the owners.
Hmm.
They've got to do your
Correct.
selling. I never like it when someone else has got to sell for me, but inevitably it seems like it's the only way to do it in this business. And so, like, I find myself actually writing. I've got a deal right now where I'm building out the internal sales deck for my champion.
Yeah.
And it's not my external sales deck, right? It's gonna be internal sales deck for them. So that it's and almost getting that internal champion to practice the pitch with me so that
Hmm.
they're comfortable with the why this is important for their organization and for their owners. Because they
Yeah.
ultimately got to get their owners, they got to sell internally and they got to sell externally to their owners. This is a director of maintenance as well, right? And so luckily this leader is pretty congenial, but they're not always in a position where they're comfortable doing that sales pitch internally. They don't even think they're in sales, but they're often, once you get that director or VP level, you are in sales all the time.
Yeah, that is something I would say that keeps me up at night more than anything else. Is what are these conversations looking like internally? And
Mhm.
we try very, very, very hard to get a seat at the table whenever we can, because it is you just never know how they're conveying the problem. Are they conveying it from their needs, from what they want, as opposed to what the asset manager
Yeah.
is ultimately looking for? And because it's different. And so actually, one thing that we've done that we've had somewhat success with, and we're really pushing it, is on-site analytics as a marketing tool, especially for fee managers, as a marketing tool for fee managers. So on-site analytics is not a tool that the management company needs to do their job better. That's a bad sales pitch to the ownership group.
Yeah.
On-site analytics, a data partner that the management company is bringing in so that they can be proactive in protecting the owner's assets, doing work that the management company would never be able to do on their own,
Otherwise,
even if they wanted to, commit budget and resources and all that kind of stuff,
yeah.
they'd never be able to do it. So, we come in and we provide presentations on the client's, asset, on their data, what we found in their data. And a lot of times we're highlighting wins that the management company is achieving for those ownership groups. And we've had somewhat success in it, but it is very, very tough with a net new prospect to earn that level of trust, for sure.
How did you get your first deal?
Just through, because I was in real estate, I had a lot of connections in the Sacramento region, which got me in the door with a lot of people that I had no business getting in the door with.
Mm-hmm.
And, really the way I started was I got together with my co-founders, who are technical co-founders, and I said, here's the problem. Here's what I think the solution should look like. And I just outlined it like on a Word document with animation. And so I would go into a management company's, office, and I would sit down with them and I would say, what do you think about this? And they'd say, oh, well, that doesn't quite work there. Or this does work here. And then I would just go home and I would iterate my animation, my story. Right. And then I walked into my first client and I was just doing the same thing. It was just basically an information mission. So I go in, I show them my animations, and I say, hey, this is what I think the problem is. Here's how I think the solution should look like. Like, what do you think about this? And he said, let's start with 1,000 units. And that, we hadn't had a line of code written. We had nothing except for what I was showing them on that sheet of paper. And that's where he cut the check, and that's how we started.
Wow. Good for you. Good for you. When people are coming to you to solve this problem, or when you're seeking to find them, you have the first conversations, what have they usually tried to do?
Typically they've tried to do it on their own. So they're trying to collect this information on their own, and they're hitting big roadblocks in terms of resources and just time allocation. And I have a perfect example. We're actually currently working with one operator out of the East Coast. They have 15,000 units. And when we first started talking to them, they told us that having this inventory was part of their new standard operating procedures for a couple of reasons: insurance, budgeting, visibility, all this kind of stuff. And what they actually did was they hired 2 full-time employees to go around their 15,000 units and provide these reports. And when we had talked to them, they were a year and a half into these employees, and those employees had done something like, it was like 20% of the portfolio.
Right.
And that's not even getting into the accuracy of their reports, but
like 3,000 units.
Like 3,000 units.
Yeah.
So it took them about
in 18 months.
Exactly. And so, at that point, they had already sunk, let's call it big round number, $200,000 into salary and benefits and all those kinds of things. And we were able to go in and get it done in 5 weeks for about $50,000.
Yeah.
And so, it ended up just being a huge win for them from that standpoint.
That's wild. Like, you think about, the amount of effort. People might go, oh my gosh, like 2 people, 166, 170 units a month. That's, that's 85 units each. Like, that might not seem like a lot of work, but when you consider you're taking physical data, it's like an extraction, transformation, and loading, and then processing and storing and creating insight. Like, that's a whole data flow that is being done manually. Like, they're creating the data with what they've seen, their notes, they're capturing it in whatever medium they're doing that. Then it's getting into some sort of table and row, something that looks like a row and a column. Mm-hmm. And then it goes from there into the different decision-making systems. And it seems like it's inefficient, but that seems like the only way to do it if you're going to hire it and go from scratch. It's kind of like milling your own flour. Like, that's just not worth it.
Yes. Well, and just to kind of twist the knife, I said, well, of those 3,000 units, how many appliances or equipment have been replaced in the last year and a half? So of
Right.
those 3,000 units that they completed, how obsolete is that data set already?
Right.
Which we provide solutions for updating the information as they go and things like that are really simple and easy to do. But that was I think a tough pill to swallow for them as well.
Yeah, no kidding. Because like it's obsolete the second you post it, but then if it takes that long to post it, it gets the quality of the obsolescence of your data is a greater percentage than you hope it should be.
Yes.
Especially when you've got another 12,000 units to do, and at that rate, you're never going to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll never have a picture.
Correct.
Wow. And so when you get taking a look at it, so they consider doing themselves. They've seen, so they're looking to get better decisions about the assets they manage, and not just the capital assets, but also the in-unit assets, right? Because there's a lot of leakage that happens there.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult to track these things because they're moving parts. They're things. They're like nouns. So like they're things in places, and they're all allocated as such, and they cost money. They have there's a time element to it because there's warranties, there's repair bills, there's scheduled maintenance, there's filters, there's all that, and then and tracking that data is largely undone. Like, what to your guess, what percentage of the 45 million units out there are actually mapped this way?
Much less than 1%.
Like 1% of 1% of 1% kind of thing.
Yeah. It's very, very, very low.
And the ones that like to buy this are fee managers. Fee managers and owner and vertically integrated. Really, you're having a similar sales cycle there. But fee managers like it because it's a marketing tool to show the owners that they're going to attract their assets like never before, which is going to help them save NOI. And it sounds like mostly prevent damages from happening. Like the NOI piece is probably a subtext to the fact that if you know that the HVAC is not going to fail with a high level of predictability, you're not going to have upset residents. You're not going to have work orders. All that tail end stuff that otherwise happens when a catastrophe happens is avoided.
Yeah, and now we're getting down to the site level, which is something we're really passionate about too. I mean, we're both on the maintenance side. We see the inefficiencies that are there. Yeah. One product that we offer with our suite of products is what we call the Onsite Analytics tag. So this is a quarter size microchip that we install on the front door or near the front door of every single unit that we onboard. So we have however many tags out there right now, but each individual tag is an access point to the maintenance hub for that particular unit. So you go up to unit 1, you're a maintenance technician, you knock on the door. While you're waiting for that tenant to open the door, you put your phone up to our microchip and you have instant access to every invoice that's ever been recorded for that unit, every work order that's ever been recorded for that unit, the age, the life expectancy, the warranty status for every single piece of equipment inside that unit. You have access to user manuals. You have access to troubleshooting resources. And so with all of that information, what we've actually found over the last 2 years is you can significantly drive down the number of work orders that you experience at a community level by about 2. What we're finding is about 2 per unit annually. And really what that comes down to is we see this dramatic reduction in the number of follow-up work orders that are associated with any maintenance issue. And I'll give you an example. So what we were finding really early on in our beta phase was that Freon leaks were a big problem in HVAC systems. And so what you would have is you'd have like a 300 unit community, and you'd have the Freon R22 Freon go out at a certain number of these units per year, and the vendors would come in, they would refill that Freon, and everybody would be happy. The problem is that if the vendor refilled the Freon within the last, let's say, 4 to 8 years, what you have is a Freon leak, Right. But if you have 300 units of that community, the community manager has too much on their plate to remember that, unit 205 just had their Freon replaced 11 months ago. They're just going to call the vendor
especially
up.
with
They're going
like,
to Freon and
yeah,
they're going to
especially with like 70% site level staff turnover.
100%. And so what our clients were able to do is by scanning that tag, by taking 15 seconds to just review the metadata on that air conditioner, they were able to see, oh my gosh, this Freon should not be out again. There must be a leak in here somewhere else. And now they're not going to have to refill that Freon 11 months or 2 years down the road. So they just saved, at the time, R22 Freon was like $200 to recharge. Now it's like $1,500. It's like it's a big problem now. But so but we saw that all across the maintenance board is like, you give technicians the resources, you give them the scope of what's been done there before, and they will make the right decisions. But
totally,
if they don't have the data, they're just guessing.
They're guessing and gambling. And so like the thing that we are really landing on is that the outdated, like there's a labor problem, right? And it's not going to solve itself. We can't even get people to come into the trades. So there's a labor problem, there's a trade problem, and then there's a working on the site and multifamily problem. And those pins are knocking each other down, right? So less and less people it's a funnel. Less and less people are coming to work on site because of all those things ahead of it. And we find that when we talk to on-site folks, for starters, it's a really tough job. Like it is a really tough job. Basically your customers, you got 300 unit building, you've got 300 bosses, you've got that are likely going to be that only call you when they're upset about something, and you've got the time that you need to solve those problems, and you've got really inefficient tools. It's like literally running around with like dull screwdrivers all the time because they just don't know what they're getting into. And so what we're finding traction in the market and conversations around burnout, like you're choosing to burn out your techs because you're not choosing change, because you can't find more techs. If you want to go vend it, you're pulling from the same pool of people. And so then if you're not adopting change, like understand that the trade-off of not changing is also a choice.
Yes.
And so are you choosing burnout? Which I don't think a lot of people, we find people haven't thought about that way. You say, hey, are you choosing burnout? And like a subject line, and they're like, what do you mean am I choosing burnout? Well, by not acknowledging the inputs to the problems that are creating a stressful work life, not work-life balance, work life on site, you are choosing burnout over smooth operations. And what does choosing burnout mean to you? And the similar thing we just described, because like if you give them the data that they need, and this group of people are so used to working with minimal data.
Yes.
10% of the data required to solve the problem, and the rest they're guessing. If you can double their amount of data they have from 10% to 20%, or quadruple it from 20% to 40%, they will do wonders for your resident experience, for your NOI, for your retention. But we're reluctant. It seems that we've been reluctant forever and ever to address the fact that they're gambling with their time every single part of their day, that we forget the value of information that we could be providing them. And so it's interesting what I've heard in our conversation so far is that because we just started, I haven't heard the tag thing even when we had our pre-call. So like we're enabling not only the asset manager to understand the likelihood of something to fail or the probability of what the capital plan needs to be, but you're taking that data and you've made it accessible to the on-site team so that they can make the relevant decisions in real time, like because they're in the field of battle.
Correct.
And so that's your maintenance director becoming an influencer to that asset manager. And so what I'm hearing now is you guys have successfully kind of barbelled the solution where one end of the barbell is heavy value for the on-site team with respect to empowering them with information. That's your influencers. And then the other side, you've got your asset manager. And oh, by the way, you get something too. You get a car. It's like Oprah, you get a car, but everyone gets something because you're able to satisfy their needs, right? And that creates a faster sale because the maintenance, if there wasn't something in it for the maintenance buyer, they might put their heels in and say, hey, I don't have time for this.
Yes, correct.
Right. That's
And
very
and
interesting.
yeah, and just going back to something you said before when you were talking about choosing burnout, the biggest pushback we get, and sometimes they come out right and say it, but most of the time it's implied, and I'm sure you can relate to this.
Mhm.
The biggest pushback we get is the status quo. This is how things have always
Yeah.
been done. This is how we do things. This is how the industry runs. And what I think is missed in that line of thinking and that mentality is the opportunity cost. Like, what are you actually losing now by not adapting?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's where kind of your like message there of like, are you choosing burnout is brilliant, because it's like, hey, we're in 2025 now. Technology looks a lot different. Businesses are adapting. AI is obviously very prevalent. If you're doing business the same way you were doing it in the mid 90s, well, there's a problem here. You're
Totally.
leaving money on the table somewhere. Maybe you don't recognize that because you don't want to go through the hassle of change, or you don't want to have an uncomfortable budget conversation or something like this. But recognizing what you're leaving on the table is so crucial, and it's such a hard conversation to have because you don't want to seem like you're a savior coming in to fix
Yeah.
their bad business or something like that. They have great businesses. They're wonderful operators. It's not about that. It's just there's better ways to do things, and having an open mind to that is really kind of like that very first barrier.
Well, if you look at just even fee managers' margins from like the last 10 years ago, like they're getting chopped,
Yes.
right? And so they're getting chopped. They've been getting progressively more and more chopped. And then now with the uncontrollables being the rise of the uncontrollables, meaning property or taxes, interest, insurance, like the uncontrollables have consumed a lot of the available free cash flow on a property. And
Mhm.
so the third party, the fee managers or the operators are now being pressed to really focus on that middle of the P&L, because like rents are flat or coming down, or maybe you're concessioning them, so it's kind of murky. And then your bottom half of it, the uncontrollables, you can't really control. And so now what are you faced with? Like all you can do is make operations better, which it's about time.
Yeah. Right.
you know and that makes it really compelling for the current offering, is that look, it's about time that we get more relevant, more up to date in the way we operate. And I think that it's kind of like we're in a unique situation about that. I don't know if it's a triple threat or quadruple threat, but like really the compression of rents, the lack of talent, and then the increase of supply that's coming on the market. It's going to be that there's just this doesn't work anymore. It's like a divide by zero in your calculator. Just it's an error, right?
Yeah. We started our research and development in like late 2021, and we really kind of flew stealth mode until 2024, just kind of
Mhm.
like figuring out what in the world we were doing, how we wanted to do it, really kind of honing in before we brought it to market. And I'll tell you, like in 2021, the conversations we were having were like, all right, great. You can save me, whatever it is, $140 a unit. That's wonderful. Rents are going up,
Doesn't
by
matter.
50% next year. So like, who cares? You
Yeah.
know? And so it's like in the beginning, we were like, yeah, okay, like understand that. I'm an operator too. Like okay. But around 2023, we started getting a lot of calls from people we talked to in 2021 going, all right, we've got a refinance coming up. Rents are, now they're flat. All right, can we talk again? Like, what does this look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially when you're like the funny thing about cost side savings is that all of a sudden it just happens to you. Like
Hmm.
you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's like a flat tire. You're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. All of a sudden you're flat tire. Like all of a sudden your day's ruined. And that's kind of like what they feel like right now. You just keep hearing it over and over again. But what I'm finding interesting is that the motivation for change is not consistent. So like like I was saying earlier, like the tech burnout conversation is gaining more traction than maybe the at this executive level than maybe the NOI conversation, because people NOI is so out of everybody's hands right now. They don't feel like they've got an input into it because it's someone else's problem, even though it's a team game, right? Like going back to your years in baseball, like very few outs are unassisted. You know what I mean? And so like it has something that has to happen as a collaborative effort. And so the priority for it, and then that would also imply the quality of leadership to bring everybody together to focus on those outcomes, like NOI, it wasn't a priority. Like that muscle's not trained.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. And you know, there are leaders in the space who are constantly looking to improve. And like if I can call out two of my really early clients were a guy named Scott Casey. He's the president of a company called Boulevard Residential, and Chris Brown, who's the president of a company called PMI. They're both fee management firms in Sacramento. And both of them, when times were good, were sounding the alarm and saying, I know times are good. I know revenue is increasing. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't lose track of our operations, of our bottom line, of the way that we're tracking, expenses. It doesn't mean we have the license to be frivolous. And so they got budget approved in good times. And then when rents got flat, when the market started to get oversaturated, their clients were coming to them and saying, all right, they were happy. They felt like they were being taken care of because now they didn't have to have that uncomfortable budget conversation now that things are bad. We were already in the budget. We were already working on the bottom line. And so we were already making an impact when things started to go poorly. And so there are trailblazers out there in the industry. It's just everybody's so dang busy. It's hard to, find them.
If you step back and take a look at the macro of the world, right? More housing is going to be approved, which means that rents are they're not going to spike, maybe ever again, or maybe in this business cycle. So more housing is going to be approved. It's going to come online. There are less people to manage the units that are available. In addition to the units that are coming online, it's going to become a data-oriented business. Bankers are going to get involved. So understanding the answers to the tough questions is going to be something that differentiates one operator from the other. Like each building is a $100 million portfolio. Like you're not taking the same sort of diligence that your fund manager might take managing a $100 million portfolio, then you're just kind of being lazy. And they're going to find that you're going to be outed with respect to your ability to compete with other operators that are more savvy. It's just there's going to be a filtering effect that happens really quickly in the next 18, 24 months because of the pressures on costs and financials, especially as some of these buildings become refied. Like the bankers are going to get smarter faster because they see the deals. And so those that don't adopt, they're not going to be around. Like there's just a truism to it that's maybe uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear, but I just don't see how the operating practices from 2020 or say 2018 to 2022 would be even tolerated or acceptable or tolerated in 2025, 26, 27. Like it's just not.
And you have in my home state of California, we have a triple threat of bankers getting smarter, like you said, and the lending atmosphere being really tough. You have insurance, which is a major issue in California, and then you have regulation like the phasing out of R22 Freon, which is R22 Freon is being phased out nationwide. So this is a type of like refrigerant that's in air conditioners. Every air conditioner has a refrigerant. But in California, it's more stringent. And so like a conversation we have all the time is like, okay, we go to a director of maintenance. What is your R22, strategy? Because if they have air conditioners that use R22 Freon, they can no longer replace it if that Freon goes out. It's not available anymore. So you have to replace those units for an issue that used to cost $150. And so they'll say, well, we're budgeting for R22 units to replace next time they go down. And my response is, okay, that's wonderful. How many R22 units do you have?
You have.
Where are they? How many of them do you anticipate to go down next year based on work orders, invoices, or age, or whatever? And then they go, oh my gosh, I don't know. You know? And those are like the really sophisticated operators. So I can't even imagine how these, we talk to some smaller operators who do, like, let's say less than 1,000 units or something like that. And some of them, the response is like, oh, we haven't even thought about that. And I'm just kind of like, how have you not thought about this? Is a huge problem. This is going to, even for 500 units, this is going to take up like several $100,000 of your budget here. Have you not put any thought? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just so, it's something that I think ultimately, as the gambles aren't paying out as frequently as they used to pay out, and the risk is becoming higher because of the cost of money and the lack of people that execute on this stuff, gambling has become less and less of an acceptable excuse. Like, we tried, we guessed, we thought this, it's just not going to be acceptable any longer, particularly if you've got a date urgency around a compliance thing like AB 2804 or 2801, sorry. And then the Freon that you mentioned, like there's just things that you can't do anymore. And that's changing, right? So, I mean, not everyone buys. What kind of objections do you guys get?
Status quo objection is our biggest objection. The second objection that we find most frequently is we don't know if our client owner is going to be excited about this, so we don't want to take it to him as a potential budget initiative, because we don't know if this is something that he'll be excited about, or he'll be as like, reflecting poorly on the management company for wanting to bring another budget item in tough times. So I would say that those are our two primary objections. We've always done it this way. We don't want to ask the owner for budget.
Right. And then how do you neutralize the owner for budget conversation?
That's a good question. I mean, that's something that is continuously evolving. I would say our biggest, and this isn't like systematic, it's hard to scale this, but we just try and, develop as good of relationships as we can with our regional and director of maintenance, and get them as excited as possible about whatever initiative that they are excited about in that moment, whether it's budgeting or cost cutting or, process or whatever it is, to try and get a seat at the table with the ownership group in a way that's going to make them look good.
Yeah. So that they're stewarding their customers appropriately.
It's very difficult though. I don't want to downplay it. It's the biggest problem we have is trying to figure out that problem. Yeah,
I share the same gap. When you go back over your career, I mean, especially you consider what you achieved in terms of professional sports, and then where you guys are growing at right now, and even through some of your syndication experiences, like what piece of advice would you give others that are stuck or trying to figure out what hell yes looks like?
So I about 8 months ago, I brought on a new employee. He's actually my brother-in-law, my best friend in the world. And he's just a brilliant, I would call him like a sales engineer. Like he really understands sales process really well. And he's totally transformed our business since he's come on from a sales standpoint. And his philosophy is you have to meet the clients where they are. So what I was doing prior to him joining our team was that I would talk to these director of maintenance or regionals or whoever, and I would probe them to give me problems that I could directly solve. So I would ask them things like, well, how's your budgeting process? How's your maintenance process? Like I would ask them very pointed questions, trying to get a very specific answer that then I could jump down their throats and say, we can solve that. And the mentality that he's brought to the team is vastly different. So what he does is, his philosophy is, we meet the clients where they are, we ask them what their problems are, and then we listen to them. And sometimes their problems are going to be problems that we can directly solve, and that's amazing. But what we don't want to do is, we don't want to stifle them into answering our problems. We don't want them to give them our problems if those aren't the problems that are top of mind for them right now. And so we ask them, what, in a very sophisticated, kind of nuanced way, what are your problems? And then we just listen. And whatever they talk about first is what is top of mind for them. Sometimes it is going to be budgeting. Sometimes it is going to be customer retention. Sometimes it is going to be these things that we can solve, and that's going to be great. But what we are after is what is actually keeping them up at night. What is actually a pain in their stomach? What do they actually care about? Because until we know that, we're just showing up and throwing up and hoping for the best. And so that is something I wish I knew 3 years ago.
It's funny. I just tripped on the exact same thing. I was at NAA, and I think I shared the story on the show before, where I'm like the first night there, kind of chats and just conversations and networking, whatever, asking a lot of people, okay, what are your priorities? What are your, what are your problems? What are your priorities? Right. And then, and it often comes down to, is it about getting the job done or NOI? And everyone would say both. And I'd say, well, that's not very helpful to me, because I don't know how to angle in on that. It's not very, because they're both so vague. Right. And getting the job done, and closing work orders, all those things. And so the next day I got up and I was like, okay, so I'm going to ask this question differently. And I asked all the same people. I said, okay, so I asked this question yesterday, and this is how you answered it. But I'm going to change the question now, and I'm curious to see how you answer. Okay, they're like, sure, I'll play ball. It sounds interesting. Sounds like fun. It sounds like a fun game. Right. Like, okay, so I asked you yesterday, what was your priorities? What were your problems? Was it NOI or whatever? They said, yeah. They said both. I said, yeah. So, okay, so now what would get you fired? Missing budget or not getting the job done? And so the audience I was talking to, 100% of people said not getting the job done. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Because then they explain why NOI doesn't get them fired. Because you have to be egregious with your spending to be fired on a maintenance perspective. Yeah. Like almost negligent, right? But not getting the job done is, and so when you're looking at your day-to-day, what do you F5 on? What do you refresh on? Because my maintenance order screen, I refresh that all day long. I don't refresh my budget every day. That's not reasonable, right? It doesn't make a difference. Nothing I can do about it, because I'm responsive. I'm not, thriving. It happens to me, I don't make it happen. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way of what you just described. What keeps them up at night is what gets them fired. Yes. And that's a very controversial question to ask. But ultimately, if you can get in that trust position and say, hey, what gets you, not that you're going to, but what would get you, what is the number one thing? Right. Instead of filtering about what makes you better, filter out what would get you in a bad position. Well, it's the difference between I want better visibility into my portfolio because I want to budget better, because I've missed my budget so egregiously in the last 2 years, and I'm worried about losing this client. Ding, ding, ding. That's what this is. Okay, now we can have a conversation, because now I know what you actually care about. You don't want to lose this client. You don't care about visibility for visibility's sake. You care about visibility for the sake of retaining your client. So let's talk about that. What does that look like? Okay. Because now, before, when you said you just want visibility, I was just going to send you a report on what you have in your portfolio. Now that I know that you care about not losing this client, okay, now I'm going to dress that report up. I'm going to help you craft a story. I'm going to put it in a deck that makes you look like you're proactive and that you're taking care of their asset and you're doing all the right things. All right, now this is a totally different offering than what I was offering you before. Yeah. No, we're doing the same thing. It's because we need to help our sellers sell, and they're often internal sellers that aren't and we've got to make sure the message stays on point. I love it. This is good. Well, appreciate you. And then who should we talk to next? Oh man, that's a great question.
Oh gosh, you put that in there, and I wasn't entirely sure what you meant there. Gosh darn it! I bet I have a really good answer. I just can't think of anybody off the top of my head.
Maybe we'll get
Oh,
what was the guy's name from Boulevard?
what's that?
Scott McKee?
Uh, I would talk to Chris Brown from
Chris Brown?
PMI, president at PMI.
Okay.
Real go getter. Very much a forward thinker. He's really really great.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll reach out to them. If I have some troubles, I'll get you for an intro.
Yeah, perfect.
Outstanding, Tyler. Well, thanks for everything today. I really appreciate that. And I do, I think that your advice in terms of like figure out how to, and the key is tactfully get to the point and understand what keeps them up at night, or as I put it, how that gets them fired, so that they can express their number one priority that they're seeking to defend against versus kind of like win for. Because like that's really the big difference. You can figure out what they're defending against, then you can really, really angle in and be a helper to them achieving their goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone that's listening, if you're listening on LinkedIn today, thank you for contributing and for adding any comments along the way. Any likes or comments to the show afterwards are always appreciated. Both Tyler and I will get notifications and we'll be able to respond. Tyler and I both tagged in the show, so if you're there, you can connect with either of us that way. It's usually the fastest way to start a conversation. If you're listening to the podcast, we'll have the LinkedIn live show on the show notes, so you can connect with us there. And there'll, of course, be a blog that comes out and a whole bunch of other little gadgets or treats that come out through LinkedIn. But thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're on the podcast, hit subscribe. Helps it easier for us to find us. And if you're listening to LinkedIn Live, hit a like. It helps. It also helps everyone to find us as well. Tyler, thank you so much today. I appreciate your conversations. We didn't get into baseball. We'll dig in that for the next show. And man, it was awesome. Really, really great conversation, especially midweek to get us through the dog days of summer, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Thanks, man. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.